They broke your heart and had absolutely no idea what they just set in motion. This isn't a video about staying in pain. This is about what begins inside a person, quietly, invisibly, the moment someone betrays their trust. By the time this video ends, you'll understand why your heartbreak may be the most powerful turning point you have ever lived through, and why the person who caused it will one day face a truth they never once prepared for. And there's something that unfolds at the very end of this story that most people never get to witness. Stay with me, because it changes how you see everything that came before it. If this video is already reaching something you've been carrying alone in silence, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it means more than you know. Before we go any deeper, I want to ask you something real. Think back to the exact moment your heart broke. What was the one feeling you could never quite explain to anyone? No matter how hard you tried, drop it in the comments below. You don't have to write much, just say it. Someone else reading this needs to know they're not alone in that feeling. Think of one person in your life right now who is still in the middle of this kind of pain. Someone who is replaying old conversations, asking themselves what they did wrong, still waiting for a message that stopped coming a long time ago. They may not be showing you how heavy it has really gotten. Send them this video. No explanation needed. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is put the right words in front of them at the right moment. If this kind of content speaks to something real inside you, the psychology behind how we heal, why we change, and what betrayal actually does to a person, subscribe to PsycheVision. This channel exists for the moments when you need honest truth more than empty comfort. And if this video becomes a meaningful part of your healing, consider supporting PsycheVision with a super thanks. Every contribution goes directly toward creating more content for the people who need this most, the ones searching for something that finally makes sense of what they're feeling. There is a very specific kind of pain that only one type of person can cause. Not a stranger, not someone who was ever truly indifferent to you. The person who had everything: your trust, your patience, your most unguarded and genuine self. The one you let inside the parts of you that you don't show easily. And when that person walks away, or worse, when they choose to hurt you and simply keep going, where does all of that love actually go? It doesn't vanish, it turns inward. It becomes the voice that finds you at 3 a.m., circling the same questions on a loop with no exit. Was I not enough? Did I see this coming and look away? Was any of it ever real? You go back through every conversation you can still access. Every message, every moment that felt warm and still makes your chest tighten. You're scanning your own memory for the exact second the ground shifted beneath you, hunting for the crack that showed up before the entire thing collapsed. But here's what that search almost never actually uncovers. And we're going to arrive at that in just a moment. Because at the same time you were sinking into those questions, something else was already quietly beginning. Something slow, something that didn't announce itself. Something that the person who hurt you had absolutely no visibility into at all. And in those first painful weeks, it genuinely felt like they had won. They seemed completely untouched. They kept moving forward. They filled their days while yours felt like they were held together with nothing. And you sat with the most unbearable thought that maybe you simply cared more than they ever did. How does someone leave something real behind and feel nothing on the way out? Psychology offers us part of that answer when a person is disconnected from what researchers call emotional accountability, the capacity to genuinely sit with the weight of what their actions cause. The impact doesn't register immediately. It gets deferred. And that deferral can look from the outside like perfect indifference. But indifference and immunity are entirely different things. And what appeared to be a closed ending was actually something much closer to an intermission. Let me tell you what actually happens inside a person after a deep betrayal, because it is not the story most people tell themselves in those first impossible weeks. In the beginning, everything goes quiet in the worst possible way. Not the kind of quiet that feels like rest, the kind that fills every room, the kind where you reach for your phone out of pure habit before remembering there's no one left on the other end to reach for. But something has already begun inside that silence, something that almost no one recognizes until long after it has already taken root. Your mind, working its way through the wreckage of what just happened, begins doing something that surprises most people when they look back at this period from a distance. It starts stripping away the illusion. Not the idealized version of that person you'd been holding on to, the real version, the one that showed up in all the moments you chose not to examine too closely. You begin remembering the moments you went quiet just to keep things from fracturing, the times you accepted something that was never actually acceptable, because you believed that love required that depth of sacrifice from you. The way you kept extending yourself further and further, even when the exchange had long stopped being equal. How many times did you silence your own instincts to protect something that was already quietly falling apart? That is not love failing. That is self-awareness arriving, late, uninvited, painful, and exactly when it needed to. Then comes the second phase. And this is where the real movement begins. It doesn't arrive in a single dramatic moment. It arrives in fragments. A morning where their name is no longer the first thought waiting for you when you open your eyes. An ordinary day where something genuinely makes you laugh, and the laugh is entirely real. An evening where the quiet around you finally feels like stillness instead of emptiness. You begin making decisions that are purely, completely your own, not run through the filter of their preferences, not weighed against the imagined pressure of their reaction, not rehearsed in your head with their response already pre-written, just yours. Research on post-traumatic growth, and growth is the actual clinical term here, not simply a motivational reframe, consistently shows that people who navigate emotional betrayal often emerge with measurably higher emotional intelligence, deeper empathy, and far more clearly defined personal limits than they ever carried before that experience, which means the person who broke your heart may have accidentally handed you the single most important development of your entire life. The wound was their doing. The healing became entirely your own. Then comes the third phase. And this is where the real power finally surfaces. You stop needing the explanation. If you have ever survived a genuine betrayal, you know exactly how enormous that moment is. Because for weeks, possibly far longer, the explanation was everything. You needed to understand why it was so effortless for them to leave, why what you gave wasn't enough, why they made you feel so small when you had given them the fullest version of yourself. But one day, without ceremony, without warning, you stop asking, not because you gave up on the answer, because you realized that even if they gave you every answer they possessed, it wouldn't return you to the person you were before. You have already grown past the version of yourself who needed it, and you begin building, not building something designed to impress them if they happen to look back one day, not constructing a performance for an audience of one. Something real, something that belongs only and entirely to you. Your standards change, not out of bitterness, but out of the precise, hard-earned knowledge of what it costs to love someone who cannot fully receive it. Your energy shifts from something you distribute without limit into something you deliberately protect. Your sense of self stops being something you hand over in exchange for someone else's approval. And this is the part they never anticipated. They had already written what they believed was your final chapter. They had absolutely no idea how catastrophically wrong that assumption was about to prove itself. Here is the psychological truth that almost no one in this conversation ever mentions. And it is the piece that makes this entire story land in a completely different way. At some point after walking away, the person who hurt you will be pulled back to look. It might arrive through a mutual connection, through a memory that surfaces without invitation, through a quiet curiosity about the life they chose to leave behind that they can't quite dismiss. And what they find when they look is not what they expected to find. You are not where they left you. You are not the version of yourself that was waiting, hoping, carrying the same weight forward that they set down without a second glance. There is something different about you now. Something grounded, something settled, something that no longer orbits around them. Did they ever truly understand what they were walking away from? Did they ever honestly sit with the question of what it would mean to lose it, not temporarily, but permanently? Psychologists call this reactance, the precise moment we recognize that something is genuinely beyond our reach is the exact moment we feel its full weight for the first time. We rarely appreciate what remains available to us, but the instant we register that it is truly irrevocably gone, something inside begins mourning what it never honored while it still had the chance. And by the time that mourning begins for them, you are already somewhere they can no longer reach. The most complete healing is a life they can no longer interrupt. Not because you built walls around yourself, because you built yourself, the version of you that exists now, shaped by what was done to you, refined by every painful night you chose to keep going rather than stop, is someone they never actually met, and they never will. Because heartbreak, when it is survived rather than surrendered to, does not simply return you to where you were. It rebuilds you into someone who will never again accept what you once did, not out of hardness, out of something far more permanent than that. If this video put real words to something you have been carrying inside for a long time, something you've never quite been able to name out loud, please hit the like button right now. It is a small thing that genuinely helps this message reach one more person who needs it today. I want to hear from you directly. At what moment in your healing did you first realize that losing that person was not the end of your story? It was actually the beginning of finding out who you really are. Write it in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else reading this section needs to hear right now. Think about the person in your life who is still deep inside this pain, the one who hasn't told you how heavy it has really become, the one still replaying, still waiting, still carrying someone who already set them down and kept walking. Send them this video. Don't add a caption or an explanation, just send it. Sometimes what a person needs most isn't advice. It's simply the right story arriving at the right moment. If PsycheVision gave you something real today, a different way of seeing your pain, a sense that your healing actually has direction and meaning, subscribe. Everything on this channel is built for moments exactly like this one. And if this video genuinely touched something in your life, consider leaving a super thanks. It goes directly toward creating more content for the people who need it most. The ones healing quietly, alone at 2 a.m., looking for something that finally makes their pain make sense. So if you are still in the middle of it right now, if the wound is still raw and the questions are still loud, hold on to just one thing. The story did not end with their decision. It began with yours. Every morning you chose to keep moving. Every moment you chose to keep healing instead of staying in the wreckage. You were quietly writing an ending they never could have written for you. In the next video, we go even deeper into the hidden psychology of why people only recognize your real value after they have already let you go, and what that reveals about how human attachment truly works at its core. You will not want to miss it.